All right, picture this. You're somewhere in medieval Switzerland. You've been traveling for what feels like forever, and you're just exhausted. Then, up ahead you see it, a monastery. For a lot of us, that's the kind of image that pops into our heads when we think about where beer comes from, right? A place of refuge, a place of, well, a place of good drink.
And of course, you're welcomed in. The monks bring you something to drink, but it's not just water. Nope, they bring you the abbey's specialty, their pride and joy, a tall, cool glass of beer. For a long, long time, this was the image of brewing, wasn't it? Monks quietly perfecting their recipes.
But here's the thing, as awesome as those brewing monks were, their story is really just one small chapter in a much, much bigger story. A story that goes back thousands and thousands of years. So today, we're going to dive into that full history, all 13,000 years of it.
So to really get a handle on beer, we have to go way back. And I mean way back. We're talking about a thirst that's older than pretty much any other invention you can think of.
So yeah, those monks, they were absolute masters for sure, but they were building on a tradition that was already ancient by their time. So that begs the question, where did this whole thing actually start?
And the answer is, well, it's pretty mind-blowing. Forget the Middle Ages. Forget even ancient Rome. The oldest proof we have of people brewing beer goes back 13,000 years. No, that is not a typo. 13,000. We were brewing beer before we were even baking bread. We're talking Stone Age stuff here.
Okay, so what are we even talking about when we say beer? It sounds like a simple question, right? But the definition is actually super important. Basically, beer is any alcoholic drink you get from fermenting cereal grains. That's it. That's the secret sauce. And that simple formula is exactly why it became a global phenomenon.
And because that basic idea is so straightforward, beer wasn't just invented one time in one place. Not even close. It popped up all over the world completely independently. People just figured it out using whatever grains grew nearby. Wheat and barley over in the Middle East, rice in China, even maize or corn down in the Andes. It's amazing, really.
But hold on. Don't picture a cold, crisp pint you'd order today. Ancient beer was something else entirely. It wasn't just a drink you'd have after work. No, this stuff was a fundamental part of civilization. It was food, it was money, and sometimes it was even part of how people worshipped.
And the way they made it was so clever, if maybe a little gross by our standards. Okay, step one, you've got to turn the starches in the grain into sugar. The quickest way to do that? Chew it. Yep, your own saliva kicks off the process. Then you just let it sit. And this is where the magic happens. Wild yeast, which is just floating around in the air all the time, would land in the mix and, well, start a party, converting all that sugar into alcohol.
You see, this ancient brew wasn't just about catching a buzz. It was literally a survival tool. It was thick, almost like a porridge, packed with nutrients. And get this, it was often safer to drink than the local water because the alcohol killed off a lot of nasty bacteria. It was so important that the Sumerians actually had a goddess of beer, Ninkasi, and they wrote poems to her. And in Egypt, it was a daily ration for pretty much everyone, from the guys building the pyramids all the way up to the pharaohs.
And if you need any more proof of just how seriously people took their beer, check this out. In ancient Babylonia, under the famous Code of Hammurabi, daily beer rations were the law. But here's the kicker. If a bartender tried to overcharge for a pint, the punishment was death by drowning. Seriously. Something to think about next time you grumble about the price of a beer, huh?
So for literally thousands of years, that's what beer was. But then, things started to change. A huge refinement began, transforming that thick, nutritious brew into the drink we'd recognize today. And for that, we have to fast forward to medieval Europe and say hello again to our friends, the monks.
So what was the biggest game changer of this whole era? It was a little green flower, the hop. Hops absolutely revolutionized brewing. They did two incredibly important things. First, they added that bitter, floral flavor that we now think is essential to beer. And second, they're a natural preservative. All of a sudden, beer wouldn't spoil as quickly, which meant you could store it and, more importantly, ship it.
This link between hops and good beer became so important that it was actually written into law. In 1516, the Bavarian Duke issues the famous Reinheitsgebot, which just means beer purity law. It was all about making sure beer was high quality and consistent, and believe it or not, it's one of the oldest food quality laws that's still around today. And this law was super strict. It said that real beer could only have 3 things in it: barley, hops, and water. Okay, wait a minute. Look at that list again. See what's missing?
The single most important ingredient, the little guy that does all the work. They still didn't know about yeast. I mean, they knew the magic of fermentation happened, they just had no idea what was actually causing it.
Figuring out that mystery is what brings us to the next big leap forward in beer's story. This is the moment brewing goes from being kind of a mysterious art form to a precise, predictable science.
And the person who finally cracked the case in 1876 was none other than the legendary chemist Louis Pasteur. He's the guy who finally put yeast under a microscope and went, aha, this is what's doing it. He identified it as a living microorganism. After almost 13,000 years, the invisible engine that makes beer possible was finally understood.
And knowing about yeast was a total game changer. For the first time, brewers could pick and choose specific strains to get exactly the results they wanted. This is how we ended up with the two big families of beer we have today, ales and lagers. You can kind of think of it like this. Ale yeast is the energetic type. It likes warm temperatures, hangs out at the top of the tank, and makes bold, fruity beers. Lager yeast is more cool and calm. It prefers the cold, works slowly at the bottom, and the result is a much cleaner, crisper beer.
So, that brings us all the way to the modern day. And you might think, okay, after thousands of years, what else is there to do? But you'd be wrong. The next chapter in beer's history is being written right now. And it's this incredible mix of looking back at old traditions and pushing forward with new ideas.
Today's brewers are amazing. They're part artist, part scientist. You've got some folks looking way back, bringing back ancient brewing styles, and even using wild yeast for these really unique, unpredictable flavors. Then you have others just pushing the envelope, creating these hybrid styles that don't fit into any neat category. And everyone, it seems, is chasing that modern holy grail, making a non-alcoholic beer that actually tastes fantastic.
So it all leaves you with one big thought. I mean, think about the journey. From what was probably an accident in a Stone Age cave to the massive global industry it is today, beer has been right there with us through all of human history. It's been changing and evolving for 13,000 years. So the only real question left is, what do you think is next?